Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar by GEFA, the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. This is the third in a series of 3 webinars, a third in a series called GEFA Water 101s. We talked earlier about a couple of different topics, and those were recorded. If you didn't catch those live, we can point you to where to get a recording of those. But today we are going to talk about emerging contaminant projects in Georgia and how you can get those financed. So we're happy to see almost 50 people on the webinar right now. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, we got started a couple minutes late here. It's not a good webinar if you don't have some little technical glitch, right? So anyway, thanks for taking your time to join us today. I can anticipate a couple of the questions. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted on a GEFA YouTube channel that you can access afterwards. That said, please still pay attention and engage in the live discussion today. I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers. I am just helping facilitate. Again, my name is Stacey Isaac Barraza. I am with IB Environmental, and my colleague Alana is in the background here too. But the stars of today's show, if you will, Vincent Harvey, who joined GEFA in June of 2022 as a project manager too. He currently manages 33 active clean water and drinking water projects, and he's the program manager for the Emerging Contaminants program, which is going to be the focus today. That program provides funding for communities to develop and implement remediation strategies for known emerging contaminants. Prior to GEFA, Vincent was a construction project manager for the Turner Construction Company, and he started there in 2018. He has a bachelor's in civil engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology, which is ironically where I'm sitting right now. I'm doing this remote. He currently serves as a civil engineer, Corps Reserve Officer for the United States Navy, leading as an officer in charge for the Mobile Construction Battalion 14 Seabees. And you won't see, or you won't hear too much from Jill Cost today, but she is his colleague and his partner in crime when it comes to emerging contaminant stuff. Jill has over 20 years of experience in environmental protection. She graduated from the University of North Georgia with a degree in biology and environmental protection division's environmental lab. Then she moved to EPD's watershed protection branch and spent over 12 years in the municipal and industrial wastewater permitting, compliance, and enforcement programs. In 2019, she accepted a position in the environmental compliance program for the City of Atlanta's Department of Watershed Management, where she provided environmental compliance oversight and management for the department's water, wastewater, and stormwater, as well as air programs. But since January of this year, Jill has been working as a project manager with GEFA, focusing on, like we're talking about today, emerging contaminants, as well as clean water and drinking water SRF projects. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a little bit of housekeeping here, right? So you are all on mute, but we do encourage your questions. There's a Q&A box. At this point, I'm not going to spend too much time reviewing how to use Zoom. We are all pretty versed in it. I think it's probably the most popular platform for these kinds of events. So go ahead and put any questions that you have in the Q&A box, and we will try to queue those up and give those to Vince and Jill. Jill is going to be not speaking too much, but she'll help Vince answer questions as we go along today. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Vince, and take it away.
Thank you, Stacey. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last of GEFA, Georgia Environmental Finance Authority's 3-part webinar series for Georgia communities interested in learning about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Our focus for this session, as Stacey mentioned, is on financing emerging contaminant projects in Georgia. Again, my name is Vincent Harvey. I'm project manager with GEFA, and I'm a code lead of the Emerging Contaminants program. Joining me today is Jill Coase, also a project manager with GEFA and a code lead for the program. So the goal of this presentation is to bring awareness to the Emerging Contaminants program at GEFA, what the funding options are that are available, the application steps, and a look at some of the communities that have expressed interest in the program with GEFA. So before we begin, I wanted to get a better idea of kind of the audience that we have joining us today. So I'll give everybody a minute to input their responses for the poll question.
Great. And our first poll question that Mandy's bringing up really is, what type of organization are you with? So your options are local government, second option, state or federal, third, engineering or consulting firm, fourth option is nonprofit, and then last but not least, we have the catch-all other. So please select which group you are with. We'll give you one moment to do that. Right, so hopefully the answers are coming in. I think we'll go ahead and close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so 47%, Vince, are with local government, which is good. 8% state and federal, and then we have about 36% with engineering consulting firms, a couple nonprofit folks, and probably one person in the, yes, one out of the 36 who voted are with some other type of organization. So there you go. That's your audience.
Well, excellent. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. It's nice to have a good broad audience. All right. So with that, I'd like to start kind of providing a brief overview of GEFA and how we can be a resource for your district and community. So GEFA's mission is to conserve and improve Georgia's energy, land, and water resources. And GEFA has provided more than $5 billion in low-interest loans and has funded approximately 2,000 projects since its inception. Some of the eligible borrowers include counties and municipalities, local water, sewer, and sanitary districts, state and local authorities, boards, and political subdivisions created by the General Assembly, and more. So I'm glad that there's a breadth of people in the audience because this applies to you. And so GEFA's program is really to help, promote economic development, improve Georgia's environment, and protect its natural resources. So we do this by managing energy efficiency and renewable energy programs for our energy side, overseeing land conservation projects on our water side, managing and monitoring state-owned fuel storage tanks, and we provide, and most importantly, we provide loans for water, sewer, and solid waste infrastructure to local governments, again, at low interest, and also in areas that directly supports that economic development. So we try to do a lot. Some of our 2022 accomplishments I just wanted to touch base on. So for projects financed by GEFA, they provided reliable water, wastewater, and solid waste services to more than 3.1 million Georgians. So that's amazing. On our clean water side, we awarded 26 loans totaling $181 million. On our drinking water side, we awarded 24 projects totaling $66 million. And our Georgia Fund has awarded 7 loans totaling $29.8 million. So amazing projects going on. So if you total that up, it's 61 communities with over 38.3 million in debt service savings. It's fantastic. I also wanted to highlight one of our newest communities, the city of Pooler, who received their Water First designation. And correct me if I'm wrong, Stacy, I believe there's actually a Water First workshop coming up soon.
Yes, there is. There's going to be a Water First workshop for any entity who's interested in Water First designation, which has a lot of amazing benefits that go along with that designation. And even if you are a Water First designee already and you want to attend, there's going to be a workshop on May 24th. So just a little bit less than a month from now in Alto, Georgia, so in North Georgia, and it's going to be from 10 to 3. And we'll drop the link to register for that in the chat right now. Thanks, Vince.
No, thank you, Stacy. And again, I encourage everyone that's even interested in any loan or grant programs with GEFA to check out Water First. It's an amazing program and it benefits you and your constituents greatly. All right. So we've talked about GEFA. Now let's get a little background on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as BILL. So what is BILL? BILL is part of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, which was signed by President Joe Biden on November 15th of 2021. So bill provides $550 billion in federal investments for public infrastructure nationwide. Some of these applications for bill include clean water and drinking water, state revolving fund infrastructure, public transit, power grid, highway infrastructure, pollution remediation, and many more. So let's explore some of the applications of bill for the state revolving fund program. For the Clean Water SRF supplemental program, they are receiving $11.7 billion in national funding for states for fiscal years 2022 to 2026. Of that, Georgia is receiving $30 million of this funding for fiscal year 2022. I wanted to highlight that the criteria for the Clean Water Supplemental Program is focused on the state's affordability criteria for recipients. And I would like to point everybody to our 2022 intended use plan that we released to kind of get a better idea of what that affordability criteria looks like. On our emerging contaminants program, the nation is receiving $1 billion in national funding for fiscal years 2022 to 2026. Of that, Georgia is receiving $1.58 million of these funds for fiscal year 2022. And bill requires 100% of the capitalization being grant and or principal forgiveness for the program, which is fantastic. On the drinking water side, the supplemental program is receiving $11.7 billion in national funding for states for fiscal years 22 to 26. Georgia is receiving $42.4 million for fiscal year 2022. So lots of money. Criteria for the drinking water supplemental program can also be viewed on our 2022 intended use plan, which again, I encourage everybody to look at. On the emerging contaminant side, the nation is receiving $4 billion in national funding for 2022 to 26. Of that, Georgia is receiving $17.8 million for fiscal year 2022. It's amazing. Bill requires at least 25% of all eligible drinking water SRF emerging contaminants funding be provided as grants and forgivable loans to disadvantaged communities and public water systems serving fewer than 25,000 people. So that's the supplemental program, emerging contaminants program. Next is also the lead service program. So the drinking water lead service line program is receiving $15 billion in national funding for states between 2022 to 2026. Georgia is receiving $66.8 million of this funding for fiscal year 2022. Now, Lisa Golphin, program and project manager of GEFA's lead service line program, hosted a one-on-one webinar, the Georgia Lead Service Line Inventory and Replacement, where she discussed the program and also some of the steps on how to get started and the tools and resources that are available for communities. I encourage everyone that was not able to attend the live session to watch that recording that we posted on our YouTube channel. It's very beneficial and we need it. And lastly, with bill signed into law, the Build America, Buy America Act, also known as BABA, is now applicable to all federal finance assistance programs. BABA covers iron and steel, manufactured products, and construction materials. It's focused and it's applicable to construction, alteration, maintenance, and repairs. Again, it's required by all federal assistance for infrastructure projects, and we're still working on our applicable waivers. I did want to note that Senior Project Manager Amanda Carroll also hosted a GEFA one-on-one webinar on the federal requirements of the state revolving fund and discussed the application of BABA. So if you weren't able to attend that live, I also encourage you to check out that session as well for more information. So we've talked about bill, so I wanted to open up another poll question for you. Go ahead, Stacy.
All right, so the second one is, which bill or bipartisan infrastructure law programs are you interested in applying for? you can select more than one choice this time. So are you looking at supplemental funding based on what Vince just described, emerging contaminants funding, lead service line replacement funding, or like we said, you can select all of them. So we'll give you a moment to respond here. And this will just give GEFA an idea of who is interested in what types of programs. So the responses are coming in. I'll give you guys 5 more seconds. Do a quick countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's see what those results are like. Okay, so a little bit more than half of folks are interested in supplemental funding. I think y'all can all see the
Yes.
results. 78% in emerging contaminants, which makes sense since they're on this call today. And then 78% as well with lead service line replacement, which all the utilities in Georgia have to do by October 2024, I should say. So no surprise there that those are high. There you go, Vince.
No, thank you, Stacy, and thank you everyone for your input. That's fantastic to see that there's a lot of interest in these programs. I'm very excited about that. All right, so we gave a little overview of GEFA. We talked a little bit about Bill. So now let's dive into the actual emerging contaminants program at GEFA. And to get a little bit of context on emerging contaminants, I also wanted to ask a poll question on the biggest topic, which is PFAS. Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, so the third poll question asks, what do you think are the sources of PFAS chemicals? So this is just based on your knowledge or experience. So you have several options there. Don't be intimidated. The last option is not sure. That's a perfectly acceptable response as well. But the first option is legacy or industrial pollutants. Second option is household products. Third, we have food packaging. Fourth, we have firefighting foam. The second to last choice is all of the above, and the last option again is not sure. So lots of options there. So quite a few words to read through. We'll give you all a moment to see what your responses are to the question. What do you think are the sources of PFAS chemicals? This time you only get to choose one though, so choose wisely. Okay, I think a lot of the responses have come in. We'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll go ahead and close that poll. And most people, 77%, Vince got it right where it is. Well, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping ahead. All of the above.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right, Stacy. It is all of the above. And it's, I know some people, I think I saw one also pick not sure. Truthfully, GEFA and many states were trying to figure out exactly what PFAS was and what it was in. And many of the conversations we were having at the beginning was focused on firefighting foam as well as textile manufacturing, like the byproducts of it. So, but when you actually really dive into it, and I'll get into it more on this next slide, as you can see, it's in many, many different sources. So again, GEFA's Emerging Contaminants Program, I wanted to give kind of an overview of our mission statement. It aligns with Bill to reduce exposure to that PFAS or PFOA and additional emerging contaminants. So our grant program is targeted on communities that are impacted by PFAS. And as you can see in the included image, there are many sources of PFAS, and which means that there are many ways that they can collectively contaminate the ecosystem that we live and work in. When Bill Emerging Contaminants was introduced, like I said, we knew that some of these sources included textile manufacturing and firefighting foam, but now that we see that there's a greater range of impact, GEFA is working diligently to bring that funding to communities to mitigate this impact on their population. So we have our mission statement, and we wanted to kind of break down that mission statement into a long-term goal and short-term goals. So GEFA's long-term goal is to ensure that PFAS impacted communities have the funding they need to implement remediation strategies. Of that, we broke it down into more short-term goals. So one of those is to collaborate with the Environmental Protection Division to determine PFAS impacted communities, collaborate with other agencies to determine funding options for these impacted communities, and continue to expand outreach for community awareness of the clean water and drinking water state revolving fund assistance options and the application process. So the moment everyone has probably been waiting for, let's talk about the money. The money. So as I mentioned earlier in slide 5, Georgia is receiving $1.58 million for the Clean Water Emerging Contaminants Program. We're also receiving $17.8 million for the Drinking Water Emerging Contaminants Program for fiscal year 2022. Now, with the fiscal year 2023 allotment, which was released back in April 3rd, as you can see, the Clean Water Emerging Contaminants Program received an increase in funding. So now it's $3.63 million for fiscal year 23 and $20.7 million in funding for the drinking water side for fiscal year 2023. So GEFA is excited to utilize this additional funding for greater community impacts. We're very excited. I also wanted to note that in addition to these emerging contaminants funding available, the state of Georgia was also allotted $54.5 million in funding from the Emerging Contaminants in Small or Disadvantaged Communities grant, which is part of the Water Infrastructure, what's the other I can't remember, for Nations grant. So while the focus of is still on PFAS remediation, the grant can be applied to communities impacted by any of the emerging contaminants that are listed in the contaminant candidate list. So this is not just PFAS. So this is a very big deal for us. So this grant is applicable to disadvantaged communities with a population of under 10,000 individuals. Now, I did want to note that BABA requirements are applicable to this grant, and EPA mentioned that they are in the process of developing waivers that can be applied for communities. AIS and the Davis-Bacon are not applicable on this grant, unlike in the SRF Emerging Contaminants Program. And as information continues to become available, we will provide that on our website. I wanted to, with this slide, focus on some of just the applicable contaminants that the remediation funding is available for. Now, the contaminant candidate list itself, which is CCL 1 through 5 currently, is extensive. And I advise everyone interested in applying for the Emerging Contaminants Grant to visit EPA's website to learn more. I just wanted to highlight a few, but again, the list is very extensive. And also, as of April 8th, EPA is actually working to, again, continue to increase that list with their draft CCL 6 list. So please, if you see any emerging contaminants that are applicable to your community, we recommend you reach out to both EPD and to us. We want to be there for you. So we've talked about the money and the opportunities that are available. I also wanted to kind of highlight some of the eligibility of projects for this grant. For the Clean Water Emerging Contaminants Program, some of these projects include the installation of technology to treat PFAS and other emerging contaminants, water resource projects, planning and the design for these capital projects, stormwater projects, and other non-point source projects, which include surface water protection and restoration, contaminated sites, and landfills. And actually, I think in this previous slide, I'm sorry to jump ahead, the city of Tucson unveiled a pilot groundwater treatment facility that they're utilizing this funding for. So again, many options available on the clean water side. On the drinking water side, some of these projects include costs associated with new treatment facilities, development of new source, consolidation with systems that currently do not have the emerging contaminants remediation capabilities. It can be planning, design, and pre-project costs associated with your pilot study, infrastructure related to that pilot testing for treatment options, and also the creation of a new public water system. So again, clean water and drinking water, many options available to you. So now that we have discussed the emerging contaminants funding that's available, I wanted to take a minute to have everyone kind of give their feedback on which program that they're interested in applying for. And I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Yeah, so poll question 4, which emerging contaminant grant program are you interested in applying for? So this time we're going to ask you to just limit yourself to one response. So the options are clean water SRF, drinking water SRF, and SDC. And Vince, we have somebody asking if you can just remind them what SDC stands for again.
Yes, I'd love to, Stacy. It is small and disadvantaged communities.
Great, thank you. And there one option choice here. And we'll just give you another moment. Count you down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we can close that poll. Okay, so the majority of folks are looking at the drinking water SRF.
And that makes sense. That makes sense. That's a big part. And that's what we usually see a lot for our state. But that's great to see that there's clean water interests and small and disadvantaged communities interests. That's awesome. Thank you, everyone, for taking that poll. All right. So let's take a few moments to discuss the emerging contaminants application process. So GEFA is working in collaboration with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division for all emerging contaminants testing. So EPD has been issuing test kits for communities to submit their samples for emerging contaminant analysis. Now, EPD has stated, I believe it was at the Georgia Association for Water Professionals, that they are following a 3-phase process under guidance from the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So phase 1, which was completed, was focused on North Georgia, where major textile manufacturer production occurs for the state. EPD noted at the Georgia Association of Water Professionals that 15 water treatment plants from 10 public water systems had detectable levels of PFAS. EPD is currently in phase 2 and has noted that 7 water treatment plants from 3 public water systems have confirmed detectable levels of PFAS. Once they have finished phase 2, EPD will then focus on phase 3, which will target public water systems that serve between 500 and 3,300 individuals. So as communities are receiving this feedback from EPD, they are encouraged to contact GEFA for financial assistance. So once the community has reached out to GEFA, we set up an initial consultation to get a better idea of the situation and the remediation opportunities we can help provide. Some of these questions just include understanding the situation and the current impact, potential solutions and steps toward a solutions or resolution, and determining that the community can take mitigation action. At the conclusion of the consultation, the community will confirm their interest in utilizing funding, and we can begin the SRF application process. So this slide just highlights kind of a high level of the SRF application process for emerging contaminants. As I had mentioned earlier, GEFA Senior Project Manager Amanda Carroll had hosted a one-on-one webinar of the SRF and state federal requirements. And I encourage everyone, again, that didn't get a chance to attend that live to view it on our YouTube channel as she goes over in more detail the actual application process, as well as the loan documents or documentation that's required for this grant funding. And again, these documents can also be found on GEFA's website as well for your use. But from a high level standpoint, the first step that GEFA recommends is for communities to submit their state environmental review process. Yes, you have to do a SERP for this grant funding to EPD. Amongst that, in the second step, GEFA will forward our emerging contaminants application form for the community to complete and send it back to us. Once we have received that application form, the community is then encouraged to initiate their architectural engineering process, also known as the one-step and two-step RFQ process. Once that RFQ process has been completed and an architect or engineering firm has been chosen, the community can reach out to GEFA, and GEFA will draft and send the grant agreement for execution pending your cert. With the executed agreement, the community can begin drafting scopes of work and soliciting bids from contractors. And again, as Stacy had mentioned, I used to be a construction project manager. So for the last step is my favorite step. And last but not least, we build. But so that is, again, a high level process. If there's any confusion that you may have on the one-step, two-step process, again, I encourage you to view our website. We give great templates and examples of what that process looks like. And also, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jill for any follow-up questions you may have. So we have discussed GEFA. We discussed BILL and what BILL means for the SRF program. We also just discussed the emerging contaminants program that GEFA offers, which includes our mission statement, financial options, and the application process. For the last few slides of this presentation, we wanted to discuss kind of the next steps and just some of the currently proposed projects that we have in our emerging contaminants funding. So for our submitted fiscal year 2022 intended use plan, we included the following communities. It was Dalton Utilities on the clean water side, Calhoun, Chatsworth, and the city of White for the drinking water side. And I just wanted to go a little into what their project or what they're proposing will help mitigate their PFAS situation. So Dalton Utilities is proposing to utilize a consultant and their in-house engineering team to design, manage, coordinate, and conduct multiple wastewater pilots for PFAS remediation. The consultant will analyze the data from that pilot study to determine what the optimal treatment options may be for them. Dalton Utilities would then have the consultant assist the staff in overseeing the construction of their agreed solution. And this is one of the first times I've dealt with this situation, and I'm excited to work with them through that. On the drinking water side, the city of Calhoun is currently looking at performing a pilot study through improvements of their gravity filters and pressure filters at 2 of their treatment plants. The city of Chatsworth is proposing to perform a pilot study for the construction of a new reverse osmosis water treatment plant, as well as the associated infrastructure and rehabilitation of the existing plants to meet this new PFAS regulations. And last but not least, the city of White is currently utilizing 2 water wells to meet their current demands. Through testing from EPD, they found out that one of their wells is showing detectable levels of PFAS, and they currently do not have any treatment infrastructure in place to be able to bring the detection levels below the advisory limits. So the city has expressed interest in performing a pilot study to determine the optimal solution for the community to meet this advisory limits. I also wanted to note that GEFA is working closely with the city of Somerville as well as the city of Lyerly, who have both expressed interest in their emerging contaminants funding. So the city of Somerville has been in discussions with an equipment vendor that is interested in supplying the equipment for the city to perform their pilot study. It's a very unique situation. So the funding will be focused on the construction costs to retrofit that vendor supplied equipment. And then Somerville would work very closely with both the vendor and with EPD to confirm that the detection levels will be below the health advisory limit. Really cool project. The city of Lyerly currently utilizes 2 wells to supply water for their community. Similar to the city of White, one of the 2 wells had detectable levels of PFAS above the advisory limit. And the city is currently in discussions with a local resident of that area to lease a portion of their land and construct a well that will meet their current demands. The city is working closely with the Environmental Protection Division to test the new source to confirm it is below the advisory limits, and then expressed interest to GEFA to utilize funding to connect that source to their current treatment facility. So to conclude, like I said, we talked about GEFA, we discussed Bill, we discussed its applications in the SRF program, and we also discussed the emerging contaminants program that we have here at GEFA. I also wanted to look at some of the projects that are currently in application status and have expressed interest in that emerging contaminants funding. I now want to take this time to thank everyone for joining us for this GEFA 101 session, and again, for your input into the poll questions. I'm excited and grateful that you guys are engaged and interested in learning and being involved in this program. Again, my name is Vincent Harvey. Joining me is Jill Coase. And on behalf of GEFA, we look forward to providing funding assistance for your next project. Now, with that being said, I want to open the floor to any questions you may have for Jill and myself about the program.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much, Vince, for that overview and then some really good details too on specific planned projects that y'all are considering or communities are considering. We have a few questions here, so I will just start throwing them out. One is, can I use sole source for vendor selection?
So the short answer on that is absolutely yes. You can use sole source funding. Now, we will need some follow-up documentation for that, but the short and skinny is absolutely, and that's a fantastic question.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Vince. And then another question is, are the plants that had a detectable PFAS public knowledge? So I think they mean like, water, wastewater utility sort of plants. Is that public knowledge? And that's, I think, I'll jump in here, Vincent. You can see if you have anything to add, but I've been checking with some of your colleagues on this in the background, this question. EPD has that list posted somewhere on their website, but you also had some examples of some of the communities that are looking at these funds for PFAS specifically. You named a few of those on your slides. So yeah, did you have anything else to add there, Vince?
I mean, Stacy, that's a great summary for that question. But again, to kind of follow up, yes, it is public knowledge, but also GEFA is very appreciative of the work and the communication that we're getting with the communities to get that remediation process started.
Okay, great.
Jill, I didn't know if you had anything else to add to that.
Hey, no, I don't. I was just going to try to drop the link to EPD's website where they have their data posted. If I can find that, I'll do that right now.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Jill.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, so Alana and Jill are on that. Let me remind y'all, please post your questions in the Q&A box, right? There might be a chat, but that's not the ideal place to post the question. So use the Q&A box. That would help us as we sort of navigate these questions here. So another question is, who is the contact at EPD for other technical questions? I think this is a good sort of piggybacking question to what came up earlier. Who is the contact at EPD for other technical questions?
Jill, I'm actually going to probably turn that one over to our resident EPD expert.
Sure. I would contact Manny Patel. He's the manager of the drinking water program. And I have his contact information. I can also drop that in the chat, or you can find that on EPD's website.
Great question.
Okay, all right. Let's see. Our next question here has to do with Vince and Jill. If a community is not mentioned in any one of your slides here today, can that community still apply for emerging contaminant money? Or I guess, in other words, if I paraphrase here, are communities maybe eligible if they're not mentioned on your slides?
And that's oh man, these are really good questions. To answer that, Stacy, we very much encourage communities that are either in discussions with EPD about any sort of emerging contaminant, mostly PFAS related, But at the same time, we do encourage everyone to reach out to us as well, just so that we can be more aware. I mean, the official process would be that EPD would take samples from this community's water sources to confirm if they have any detectable levels of PFAS, or if they're any emerging contaminant, if they're applicable to the small and disadvantaged communities grant. But like I said, we want to be involved and we want to be right there with you. So I encourage you to reach out to both EPD as well as GEFA as well, myself and Jill, so that we can help in any way we can.
Great, yes. And on one of the previous GEFA 101s earlier this year, we did hear from Manny Patel. He was talking at that point about lead service line, I think, inventories and replacement. It's the same Manny Patel, and Alana and Jill have dropped his contact information into the chat, so you can access that. And speaking of this series of GEFA Water 101s, there was a series where we had 3 webinars for each month. This is the 3rd, so the last of this current series. But we want you all to know that there is another series of GEFA Water 101s coming up, most likely in June. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. And we'll also drop into the chat a way that if you want to be reminded or receive the registration links for those when they come out, that you can get plugged into a couple different groups or listservs or whatever, where you can get those announcements in time for signing up. All right, let's see what else we have here, Vince and Jill. Okay, so we have a little bit of information about the EPD testing that is completed in North Georgia and when those results will probably be coming back, but I think that's more of an EPD question.
Agreed.
So we will go ahead, Kim, and try to get that over to Manny, or now you have his contact information yourself. See, checking a couple different places. So a question from John here is, can a system request reimbursement for a pilot program that has already been completed? Again, I think pretty good answer, pretty good question, I should say here, Vince and Jill, important one. I'll repeat it. Can a system get reimbursement for, let's see, can a system request reimbursement for a pilot program that's already been completed?
Jill, would you like to answer?
I'll take that. So if they did not go through the environmental review process, then the answer would be no. We still have to follow the same procedures to do the CERT process. So if that for some reason was done, then that it's possible. We would have to discuss, I think, but I think in general, no.
That's right. In general, no, but I would still encourage you to reach out to us so we can see, because we want to help any way we can. And truthfully, Jill and myself appreciate that proactive nature to want to start getting into that remediation process. So I still encourage you to reach out in regards to that.
Okay, great. But it's a really good question, I think, and it's good. I'll underscore, I don't actually work at GEFA, so it probably means a little bit more coming from somebody who's not, on staff at GEFA. They're pretty open and approachable over there. And, in a case like this, maybe you felt intimidated, or you didn't think that your work would qualify, or you just wanted to get started right away to address the problem. A reach out, an email, a phone call to the GEFA staff that handle some of these programs is usually a good idea, and they'll point you in the right direction, so you don't have to be in the position of having gone down one path and now trying to see if it's reimbursable. So just a shout out to the staff that they're very approachable for people who handle and manage a lot of money. So feel free to reach out. Jill and Vince's information right now is on your screen, and if you're trying to reach anybody else on that team, it's pretty easy to find their contact information from their website as well. All right, let's check back in with the questions here. Okay, so Charlie's asking, does the pilot study equipment have to meet the BABA requirements?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Currently, again, depending on which grant you're interested in applying for, there are applicable waivers But for the most part, yes. And this is true for not even just emerging contaminants, but our SRF programs will follow BABA requirements. Jill, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good question.
I will say that we have been in discussions with EPA about that, and we sort of, I think what you're saying, Vince, is absolutely correct, but there still may be a chance that they may get a waiver, like you said. So we're still trying to work out the details of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's a good point too that Jill is raising. This is the first time ever with this level of funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's called, it's unprecedented, and we probably won't see this level of water infrastructure funding anytime soon in our lifetimes, right? And maybe the next couple generations as well. All that to say, unprecedented means we haven't done this before. So while there might have been a vision by EPA, for instance, on how this was going to all roll out, things are changing a little bit. We've seen that a little bit on the lead side, for instance, on the levels of funding. So keep checking in. Don't feel like you've come to a presentation in fall of 2022 and now you know everything about what's happening. Things are a little bit in flux, sometimes not at the state level, but even at the federal level. So do stay engaged, and don't be surprised if you see a couple, changes that may seem like conflicting information. All right, so we have another question here. Does GEFA or EPA have any guidelines for running pilot studies, or is it up to the municipality? So let me read that. Let me read that again. Does GEFA, I guess maybe we mean EPD here, or we could throw EPD in it. But the question specifically is asking, does GEFA or EPA have any guidelines for running pilot studies, or is it up to the municipality?
I would say it's up to the municipality. EPD certainly will have their own set of guidelines, but as far as GEFA, I think this is, as you said, it's still so new that to my knowledge, we don't have any sort of guidance on how to do that pilot study. We leave it up to the community to figure out what needs they have and what would meet their needs.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jill said it very eloquently. And that's part of the reason too for this specific webinar, was to kind of introduce or show just some of what you guys are already actively doing, are getting ready to do. But Jill said it best. It is up to the community.
Excellent. Okay, at this point, I want to see if Jill or Vince have any concluding remarks, because that's the end of the questions that I'm seeing submitted.
Go ahead, Jill.
I would just say, as Vince has, I think, said throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, if you think you might be eligible for some of this money, but you're not sure, please reach out to us. We're very easy to talk to. We're eager to get some projects started. So yeah, we're here. And we may not have all the answers right up front, but we will get them for you.
I couldn't say it better, Jill. We are absolutely here for you. We are excited to work with you, and we look forward to being a part of your journey through, whether it's the supplemental program, the emerging contaminants program, or the lead service line program. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jill and Vince, for answering your questions. Vince, for all the presentation and the material that you went through. Really appreciate your time and sharing today. And I want to just draw everybody's attention back to the chat. So you, again, were supposed to be putting your questions as a Q&A, and we were handling those in the background. But in the webinar chat, you should see some interesting information about, I'll scroll through here, the way to sign up for the Water First workshop that's going to be in less than a month. That's a free workshop, and it's going to be in North Georgia, and it'll be just telling you about how to become a Water First designee. I will say that nobody starts that process and finishes it in a month or two. It takes sometimes a couple years. So even if you're semi-interested, go ahead and start getting the information now and hearing from other designees, etc. Right? Then we have a link to the intended use plan. We told you where you can find recordings to the webinar. You will find today's recording there eventually, and then the past one's already up there. Let's see. We also put in the contact information from Manny over at EPD, who deals with emerging contaminant stuff on the EPD sort of compliance side. And yeah, I think y'all were asking about EPD PFAS information and lists of communities or utilities or plants that have, have PFAS, and we put a couple links in for where we think those are, even though that's more handled on the EPD side than the GEFA side. Yeah, and we reminded you again that this webinar concludes the series of 3 webinars for sort of the winter spring of 2023, but we do have 3 others that we're doing most likely in June. This is probably opening up a can of worms, but if you have a topic that as a participant you want to hear from or hear about, you can feel free to email me. So my email address is kind of long, but it's Stacey, STACEY @ibenvironmental.com. And we'll see. Thank you, Alana, for dropping that in. So we'll see if we can accommodate some of what you think you want to hear more about in the next series of GEFA Water 101s. But yeah, and I'll give you a little tip. Most people have probably figured this out because there's such good information in the chat. Usually, if you go to the bottom of the chat where it says to whomever, or where you could, at the bottom of the chat, you should see 3 dots next to maybe a smiley face or something. If you click on those 3 dots, you usually have the option to save the chat, which I find is a very useful feature with all of these links and contact information, etc. So instead of copying and pasting each one of those messages, you can save the whole chat onto your machine by hitting those 3 dots there. So anyway, thank you all for your time and attention. We know we had a lot of poll questions, and you were really responsive and giving us the feedback to help the presentation just be guided better. And we also appreciate all the really good questions. So reach out to Jill and Vince. I know not everyone would have asked their questions sort of live here, but don't hesitate to ask. You never know where it's going to fit into the current program, but the programs are somewhat evolving as well. And so, yeah, reach out and see what direction they may be going in. All right, well, with that, everyone have a great afternoon, and thanks again for joining us, and look out for the recording eventually. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Stacey.
Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.